I'm starting to wonder if we're at a turning point in Florida's housing market. And when I say that, I don't mean the typical turning point that most people do when they make YouTube videos talking about Florida and the market. Right now, the common narrative is Florida is going to crash, or it is crashing. And here's the reality of the situation. A lot of Florida, we have seen prices go down over the last couple of years. Depending on the area, some it's maybe been a little more dramatic, some it's maybe been a little more slow and steady, some maybe stayed flat, maybe even slightly appreciated. It just depends on the area. But as a whole, I think it's safe to say things have went down. Inventory has went up. But there's some interesting signs and things happening that I start to make me think that maybe we're gonna see things stay flat for a while, and maybe we are on the cusp of seeing appreciation again in the next few years. Now, I'm not saying this is for sure going to happen, but what I do want to say is that we might be past the worst of the price downturn. And I know a lot of people are going to be pushed back on this because most of what YouTube is flooded with right now is people talking about how Florida's crashing or it's got to go way down more and yada, yada, yada. But this is the thing we've always said on the channel, we think there's going to be correction, not a crash. And so what we meant by that is, '08 was a crash, right? You saw prices, I got to flip this around for you. They kind of were appreciating, and then all of a sudden they went up real high. And, if the long-term appreciation line was here, after the crash, they went down to here. What we think is happening this time is appreciation was doing this. And if it continued right here, when the line picks back up here, we think that's when things are going to start to just continue back on where they were. And what we had was like this big hump in 2020, 2022, and then, it started coming back down. And in a lot of areas in Florida, it's kind of been flat-ish for the last 6 months or so. And we think once it catches up to that line and it gets to about that point, it's going to continue. Just to be clear on what I mean by that. And so here's some of the reasons I think we might be to the point where prices might start going back up or being a little more flat for a while. The first is in some areas of Florida, specifically like where we live, like some pockets like Northport and Inglewood and parts of Venice, certain pockets of Venice, they are getting really close to that line that I was telling you about. So as always, if you are looking to buy or sell anywhere from Sarasota down to Port Charlotte, Inglewood, of course, where we live, Venice, or the entire Orlando metro, get a hold of our team, 941-221-1897. We'd love to help you avoid mistakes, save a lot of money. We've helped one client save like $90,000 on a new construction home and get you answers to those questions that sometimes are impossible to find online. Since we're getting close to that line, that's one indicator. Okay, we might be close to this correction being complete. 2, investors. So yes, there are way less investors supposedly looking to invest in Florida. Now, obviously, when we talk about investors, there's a lot of types of investors to talk about. You got your big companies like your BlackRocks, you've got smaller mom and pops, you got people looking to do the Airbnb thing when that was like blowing up in like 2021, 2022, and everyone was jumping on that train. You've got people that are looking to do long-term rentals as investments, people just looking to do flips, all kinds of things, right? And so it's kind of hard to get good, clear data on exactly what's happening with that. But one thing I can tell you is, so me and my wife, Haiti, who's in some of the other videos on the channel, it is an actual real estate agent. We do have another channel where we go all across Florida and we do home tours. And so sometimes we'll use Opendoor for some of these homes in other cities. And we've noticed over the last 2-ish years, they've been I don't think this is any secret that they've been offloading properties, but it's gotten to the point where now when we go to a city, like a metro area, like say Tampa, for example, like we'll maybe able to find a couple with like a Tampa address and then, a couple in other neighborhoods that like Lutz or Wesley Chapel or something like that. And so there will only be one in Lutz and one in Wesley Chapel. And it used to be the case that there was like multiple in Lutz and multiple in Wesley Chapel. And there's just a dramatic drop off of what Opendoor owns in Florida at this point. And so there's a couple things that tells us. Number one, it tells us that Florida's market obviously is not as good now for the kind of flip and resell, which is like what Opendoor does, right? They would buy a place, they put in new carpet, some paint, maybe do some more major upgrades, sometimes less. It just depended on the home. And there was varying degrees of results on how good they would look, but that's kind of more or less what the business model was. And it worked great, when you're talking like early 2020, because at that time, prices were at, now we know at a pretty good low price, and interest rates were fantastic. And so they were able to buy a lot of these places and then go ahead and flip them and make a quick profit. Or sometimes not, they wouldn't even need to change them. They just have to hold on to the house for like 5-6 months. And in that market, you could make some good money. Obviously, those times are over, so they're looking to get out, right? So that tells us about that side of the market. So that tells us, like, investor, yes, demand is very, very down. We also know the Airbnb crash happened. A lot of people were making bank on that like crazy for like a year or two, and then they stopped making as much money, or they started to figure out that it's more work than they thought it was going to be, and it's not just like passive income. And so a lot of them look to get out. I'm not gonna walk in this. That looks like quicksand. I don't even know if this is a trail anymore. Okay, here we go. Woo! And we started to see a lot of investors getting rid of properties. Now, I'm sure there's a fair amount of investors that maybe are having a hard time selling the property, but there's also another possibility that I'll get into in a second. But what I can tell you is crystal clear from what we've seen with Open Door and the amount of properties that they currently have on the market is that I think a lot of the investors that wanted to get out have mostly gotten out at this point. And what I mean by that is there's very few properties that they probably are still owning, meaning that's not adding to the pool of what's out there. There's a cone here, and I'm not sure why. If I'm not supposed to go through here, I'll just be careful. Okay, so a lot of investors have probably got out of the area, right? So that means that inventory influx is over with from that part of the market. Or I shouldn't say over with, but the bulk of it is probably done. The people that wanted to get out may have got out, number one. But number two, and this is, I think, the bigger point to point out, and there's one other really big one. And that's the fact that things have started to shift in Florida a little in other regards. I don't mean the market necessarily. And in some markets like Inglewood, Northport, and other parts of like the Orlando metro where the prices are a little bit lower, we have seen months of supply really go down. And so I just want to cover this quick before I get into the point I was about to, just to kind of put this into context and help people understand if you don't know what that means. Months of supply just says if no more homes came on the market, how many months would it take for the existing supply to all sell and go bye-bye? And it's a good metric because a lot of these doom and gloom YouTube channels or crash bro YouTube channels, they just want to always make everything about how terrible the world is and no one can afford everything. And I'm not here to say people are having a hard time affording things and Florida hasn't got expensive, but it's just like they'll always only look for the negative story and they won't present the other side. So a lot of times they'll always show like, look at all the inventory, but they don't also talk about the demand and how that, is balancing or not balancing the inventory. And the months of supply is really important because it looks at both the supply, the inventory, and the demand. It looks at the pace at how fast homes are selling and says, this is how long it would take them to sell. So in some areas like Inglewood, Northport, some, lower price parts of Orlando metro, we've seen that months of supply come down to about 3 months, which is almost hovering into seller's market territory again. Now that's not everywhere. Like higher priced areas, it's sitting closer to 6 months or maybe above, which generally is looked at as being more of a buyer's market. But the reason I wanted to point that number out is to set the table for this next point. And we've seen a few things change. The first is us personally, we've been getting a lot busier and we've been talking to other agents, other new construction communities, agents, and a lot of them are just like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but we've just been really busy lately. And we've been crazy busy lately. So we've been seeing more demand come back. And we think part of it is people are like, you know what? I've been waiting to make this move for how long? Let's just do it. Or the conditions are close enough or just about right. I'm ready to do it. And then the next thing that ties into this is affecting, I think, both people wanting to buy here now and two, people that do live here saying, you know what? Maybe I don't want to sell anymore or I don't need to sell anymore. And the affordability has gotten a little better. It's not way better. This is not me saying, oh yeah, Florida's back to like what it was in 2019 again. I mean, it's definitely not what it was after the 2008 crash, but it has gotten a little bit better the last couple of years. And so what I mean by that is we have seen home prices come down. So if number one, people want to buy, the price of the home is a little bit less. Number two, with that means the property taxes are a little bit less. Number three, That will make insurance less on its own, but number 3 or 4, I forgot what number I'm on, insurance rates has started to come down. A lot of people are not talking about this or covering this. A lot of people still see these doom and gloom realtors and crash bros, and they'll always talk about, yep, everyone's paying $7,000, or they'll point out the one person paying $7,000 a year, or the one person that lost $100,000 on their house, or whatever the case may be, to try to, like, again, perpetuate the narrative that everything is crashing and it's all doom and gloom and yada yada. Again, I'm not saying things aren't getting more unaffordable or that prices aren't coming down or any of those things that they like to point out, but I just feel like they push it to an extreme level, and I want to give a little bit more of a balanced perspective on it. And so, like us, our insurance went down $300 this year, from $2,600 to $2,300. I always say this, but if you haven't watched the videos before, we live a couple miles from the coast, from the actual ocean. We don't have hurricane impact windows or shutters, and we have a new-ish roof. So, and our home is early 2000s home, just to give you some perspective on that. You know, it could be way more depending on location, the condition of the home, the age of the home. Those are all factors, but that's what we pay. And it went down $300. More companies have came to the area. So that's something we have heard from other people as well across Florida. And we've seen, and can, you know, you can look it up. More companies are coming to Florida for insurance, helping bring competition and prices down. So that's making things a little bit more affordable. And so one other thing to note with that, it's not just about, okay, these things are drawing people to want to move down and now is maybe the time, and that could shift the market. But the other thing we've got to talk about is how that's also shifting the perspective of people that live here. So we have seen a lot of homes come off of the market that were listed for sale. And so part of it is, of course, you know, they're like, I can't, you know, if they bought in 2021 or 2022 at the peak, and now they can't make back what they bought it for sure. Like, that is a driving force to say, hey, you know what, I'm just not going to sell this home. And maybe part of it was because things got unaffordable for them. But here's the thing, with some costs coming down, now maybe it's affordable. So now maybe they're taking it off the market, and maybe they're planning on putting it back on in a couple months or a year, or when things get better. Or maybe, and I think this is a real possibility for a percentage of people, there's a certain amount of people that are just like, you know what, I'm just going to stand pat. I can afford this now. Or I've been here a couple years and I didn't think this was right for me, but now I've kind of settled in, and, you know, I wasn't able to sell the home, but you know what, I kind of like it here now. I've kind of adjusted. And I think there's a certain percentage of people that that's going to be the case with. And I mean, here's the other thing too, like, you'll get some people who, I mean, we have this just about every year, like, you know, hurricanes when they come through or whatever, if you're living by the coast. Some people, whether they get damaged or not, are just like, I just can't do it anymore. But then you go through, you know, the course of a year, and maybe you don't get anything for that hurricane season or summer, or, you know, just by the time you get to the next one, and it just kind of fades away, and you're just like, you know what, you kind of forget about it, and it's not top of mind, and then you're like, you know what, I don't want to sell anymore, I'm good. You know, so there's a lot of things psychologically that can happen over time that could maybe make someone just change their mind, or again, conditions can change. You know what I mean? You know, maybe some of these people looking to move, prices went up like crazy because of, you know, the COVID boom of, you know, the housing market, and things got really unaffordable. And maybe some of these people have lived here for decades and it became unaffordable. And I'm not saying like now that things have went down a little bit, it makes it dramatically affordable, but it maybe makes it manageable, or gives a glimmer of hope that things might get better. And again, I'm not saying everyone's going to look to stay, but I think there's a percentage. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing a lot of homes come off the market. I'm not saying it's the entire reason. Obviously, there's a lot of factors and a lot of different reasons for a lot of different people. But it's a possibility. On top of that, new construction. I don't know if I mentioned in this video, previous video, I try to mention this about every video, but we help someone save $90,000 on a new construction home. With those options being out there, that's pretty enticing. First of all, just for people that want to buy new construction, you know, between the incentives, maybe them getting rid of fees for the lot, buying down interest rates. There's just all these crazy things that they're doing. And a lot of times too, you can go well below the asking price. Again, if you're looking to like get the best possible deal, make sure you get a hold of us if you're looking to buy in the Orlando metro, or any of our, from Sarasota down to the Port Charlotte, Englewood areas, of course Venice where we live, and we can help you save some money. But get a hold of us before you go to the builder, because if you sign up with them and all that kind of stuff, then once you get into the process with them, we're not able to help you anymore. But if you want us to help, we can do that. Again, anywhere else in Florida or the United States for that matter, you can click the link in the description, answer a few questions. That'll get you connected with a local realtor that knows that area and can help you. But that, alone obviously is going to be enticing for a lot of buyers. And we've seen a lot of our clients go that route as far as saying, you know what, some of these incentives are getting pretty crazy. Knowing that you can get a good deal below asking price, maybe depending on the home. Again, each home's going to be a little different, but knowing that that's a possibility has started to draw a lot of people in as well. And again, I'm not saying we're back to like the craziness of 2021, 2020, but we've seen a pickup. And then on top of that, even if you're not looking to buy a new construction home, with that being out there, and some buyers looking to say, this or this, I'm willing to do either, that brings prices down on resale homes. That brings some downward pressure for those homes as well. So you might be saying to yourself, well, okay, Jesse, you just made the case now that prices are coming down. I thought you were saying the market's turning around. But that's exactly what I'm saying is we've seen more people come back to try to buy lately. And again, months of supply come down in a lot of areas because prices have come down, and not just with the homes themselves, but the incentives, the insurance, the property taxes if you're buying something new. So you put all that together and it started to, drive a little bit more interest from people to move to the area again. Investors' demand is down, but they've also offloaded a lot of their inventory, it seems like, at least Open Door has. And here's the other thing. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know how the economy is going to go, inflation, but all those things could tie in to make the market for housing go one way or another. Those markets will affect the housing market. But I think the other thing that a lot of people are putting in consideration is those things and how they may or may not affect interest rates. And if we see interest rates go down again, I want to be clear. I don't think we're going to see 2020, 2021 pandemonium again, unless it goes down to like 3% again, which would be insane. And I do not foresee that happening unless we have a huge economy crash. But I don't think it's out of the question for some people to be looking to buy now and maybe refinance with the hope that things will go down in interest rates in the next couple of years and save money that way. But of course, being smart and saying, hey, if it doesn't, I can still afford this home in 2 to 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. You don't want to go into something with the hope of prices going down. And I think some people are saying, what if interest rates go back down? Right now prices have finally come down in Florida in all those different areas that I've talked about. I think the one that most people notice though is like new construction and the incentives there, and just even resale home prices and values, how those have come down. And so I think they see that and say, and competition doesn't seem to be too crazy right now. Maybe now would be a good time to buy and, get ahead of the curve or the wave if things get a little bit more competitive again. And if interest comes down, they are foreseeing that, maybe then that brings, that competition in, and that's kind of the trigger to make things a little bit more difficult again. And so I think that's why, and this is not an across the board assessment. I think, again, it's more of the lower priced ones because, with the way interest is right now and as much as homes have come down, I think, it's the homes sitting between 300 to maybe 500,000 or less. So you put all that together, and I think that's kind of making it enticing within a certain price range, for a lot of people. So, we're talking like the people that are looking at maybe, I'd say 500,000 or less. I'd say more so like 350 and less, with where interest is at right now. It's a time to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm ready to jump in now. Because it works out with my monthly mortgage payment that I can afford this and it makes sense and I can do this. Some of the more higher priced homes, and interest, it just depends. But as a whole, those areas, the months of supply, we have seen be a little more sticky and stay higher. So there's sort of a divide in the market, it seems like, across Florida. And it really depends which market you're looking in and for, that market, which way things are going to go the next few years. But a lot of times what you do see is the way things are going with one market will bleed over into the others. That being said, I think we do have a little ways in the higher price markets, anything like I'd say 500,000 and up. We have a little ways to go to see that start to come down a little bit before I think we're going to see that months of supply drop a bunch. But here's one other thing to consider. I am filming this right in the beginning of September, actually. Right now, there's not a lot of, generally this time of year in Florida, most of Florida, every market is different, but like our area, there's usually not as much activity. Like I said, we've seen a lot of buyer activity. Usually there's not a lot of people in general though. This is almost every year, putting a lot of homes on the market this time of year. Usually you see more homes coming on the market in the winter because there's more people that are coming down for the winter. And then, you know, they're gonna maybe have their last winter here or just get down here, and it seems like a good time to get out of the snowy area and put their house on the market and have their last winter in Florida, you know? And they'll put more homes on the market then, so we'll see inventory come up usually a little bit in the winter. But then we also have a lot more people down here, so we also have a lot more buyers gobbling up that inventory. So again, that's why I want to, you know, point out the nuance of this, because you'll get some Crash Bro YouTube channels talking about, they'll point out how the inventory skyrockets in January or February, and they won't put it into context. They won't also say, but there's also a lot more people buying homes right now. They'll usually kind of cherry pick a little small data point or a month or a week or a certain home or whatever the case may be to kind of like vindicate what they've been trying to like perpetuate. Like some of these people have been talking about a crash happening since like 2018, 2019, and then home prices went up like crazy. And now like when they're finally coming down, now they're like, yep, see, I was right all along. We're like, yeah, but if you would have bought in like 2018, 2019, you still would be sitting pretty with your home equity right now. You know what I mean? So again, that's why I just try to keep it real with you guys. I see some people on YouTube making everything seem like doom and gloom, or they have like make a prediction and they're gonna like find data to make it fit that no matter what. And then I also see people like making it seem like everything's sunshine and rainbows and that Florida is going to keep growing forever and appreciation and we don't have any problems. Like, look, I want to make sure you know what's going on and how it's actually going on. But as always, if you are looking to buy or sell anywhere from Sarasota down to Port Charlotte, Inglewood, of course, Venice, where we live, or the entire Orlando Metro, those are all areas we serve. Call or text our team at 941-221-18987. We've helped a lot of people avoid mistakes, save a lot of money, and get answers to questions that sometimes are just impossible to find online, and we would love to help you too. And if you're looking to buy or sell anywhere else in Florida or the entire United States, actually, for that matter, click the link in the description, answer a few questions, and that'll get you connected with a realtor in the area that you're looking to buy or sell, and we do the same for you that we would do for you. If you want to know more about moving to Florida, anything from the home buying process to alligators, the bugs, to pretty much anything you could think of. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I haven't been swatting too many bugs. I'm in the middle of like jungly woods here by the water. So just kind of goes to show you how the bug thing gets blown out of proportion sometimes in Florida. But we got a whole playlist with all kinds of stuff about Florida right here. Check it out. Thanks for watching, and live breezy.